Hello and welcome to 3D modeling video number 46. Let's continue learning about the modifiers. So last time we left off at the displace modifier. Next we have edit mesh. So I've been teaching you guys a lot about edit poly, but we also have a different modifier called edit mesh. And you'll notice that it has a lot of the same sub-objects like vertex, edge, polygon, element, but the border has been replaced with face. So it's got a lot of the same tools that you've already seen, like cut, slice plane, chamfer, extrude. However, what I've read and learned is that the edit mesh modifier is kind of a less powerful version of edit poly, so I've just never bothered with it. Edit poly does all the things that we need. Next we have edit normals. So normals are these invisible arrows pointing outwards, directly outwards from every vertex, and with the edit normals modifier you can actually visually see them and modify them. Now normally you don't have to bother with this. However, when you're making certain game resolution assets like plants and trees, editing the normals might be a good idea. And here's a picture showing why. So you might know that the trees that you see in games are just kind of like planes with a texture and with an opacity map to give you this effect. Now you notice the tree on the left here looks pretty bad, whereas the trees on the right look good. So why is that? Well, the trees on the left, let me go ahead and give you an example. So this is what the plants are made of. They're made up of planes, in different shapes that have been arranged by an artist to look good. So let me go ahead and apply edit normals. Now when you rotate the planes, you can see the normals rotate along with it. They have all the same rotation settings. So on this tree object, all the planes have been rotated all over, and so you have normals going in every single direction. It's a mess. And the lighting of your model depends on the normals. If you have normals going all over the place, you will get this bad effect of shadows everywhere. However, on these trees, the normals have been changed so they all point neatly and cleanly directly outwards, which gives you this nice effect because now the light can shine and cover all the planes without interruption, without being affected by the normals going every single direction. So this is an example of where you might want to edit the normals. And there are certain tools you can use to help you do this. So that's an example of why you would ever want to bother with the normals. Normally if you're modeling, you never have to even worry about the normals. Next we have edit patch, which again works with patch objects. I've never really experimented with patches because I found that polygons do what I need them to do, but remember that patches are a different way of working with geometry. One day, if I see that they have some advantages, I might go ahead and try working with them. But if polygons do everything I need them to do, I'm just going to go ahead and stick with polygons. Next we have edit poly, which you should know all about. I have several videos devoted to all the parts of the edit poly modifier. Next we have face extrude. So you can extrude faces with the edit poly modifier. However, you can also do it with a special modifier. So if I just select the extrude modifier, face extrude, and it's a very simple modifier, and increase the amount and the scale, then nothing is really happening. So let me try to instead apply edit poly first, make a selection, and then apply face extrude. Okay, so now it works. It works when you have a selection first. So as you can see, it goes ahead and extrudes it. You might be wondering, what's the point of this modifier when you can just as easily do it in edit poly? Well, there might be some effects you can achieve with this. If you can remember, you can animate these parameters So there might be something you can achieve with that. However, for our purposes, it's kind of a strange little modifier that's just hanging around there. Next we have FFD. We have 5 variations of FFD. We have FFD 2x2x2, 3x3x3, 4x4x4, FFD box, and cylinder. So, if I remember correctly, FFD stands for Freeform Displacement, and this is a very nice way of quickly changing the shape of your object. Just very quickly, it can give you some nice quick results. So if you find, I've shown you this modifier before in a previous video, I think when I was talking about instancing, but this can allow you to quickly spice up the shape and silhouette of your object very quickly and give you some new ideas perhaps. So if you notice that, I don't know, let's say that I'm modeling a piece of armor, and you know, this is like armor that goes on forearms or legs or something. So let's just say this is a basic piece of armor, and it's got a very boring square shape right now, and I want to quickly make it look nicer. Experiment with the forms. I can apply FFD. 2x2x2 is very simple. Let me go ahead and apply 4x4x4, and this will create a 4x4x4 grid of points that will control whatever vertices are closest to it. So I'm going to go ahead and go to you can first use set volume. With set volume, you first set up where the points are located. So you want to, if you want, you can get them closer to the actual geometry. The FFD modifier does not have any symmetry, so to get symmetrical effects, select them and then use the scale tool to get the symmetry going. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going on the set volume and I'm getting the control points close to the actual object, so it will have a better deformation. Now when I switch to my control points, select them and move them, it has now begun moving the basic geometry which the modifier was applied to. So basically you can go ahead and move on different points, and once again use the scale tool and the move tool and perhaps even the rotate tool to, you know, quickly get a nicer looking shape in your object. So this right here is before the modifier, and this is after. And you can see how it turned this simple square boring object into this something that looks kind of cool, and I can continue experimenting with this. So now this looks like a much nicer piece of armor. Of course, this might be a little bit too extreme, but you get the idea of how you can use this. Quickly modify things and, you know, experiment with form. A lot of times when you find your object is just looking a little bit too boring, too plain, too simple, a quick FFD modifier might do the trick. And of course we also have FFD box, and this is just like FFD 4x4x4, except with this one you can actually customize the number of points. So if you want more control in the, let me see the length, then you can now customize it so you have a lot more control and you can get some nice results. So it's just like FFD 4x4x4, except you can customize the number of points to give yourself more control where you need it. So that's that. The next modifier, FFD cylinder, is just like the box except it's now a cylinder shape. So you can use it to modify cylinders. Or or anything that you want to be modified in a cylindrical fashion. You can even use a sphere. And I can customize the number of points. For example, have more sides. And I can use it to quickly spruce up this sphere. And turn it into something else. That looks strange. Okay. Next we have the flex modifier. A very interesting modifier. Let me go ahead and give this sphere some quick animation. So this is not a video animation, but I just want to do a quick animation to show you what the flex modifier does. So I'm going to turn on auto key. I'm going to move to frame 20, move the sphere over here. Okay, so we now have some simple animation going. It takes the sphere about 20 frames to move from point A to point B. So there it is. So you can see it just goes and it stops. What the flex modifier allows you to do, it allows you to add quickly and simply add some secondary motion to your animations. So if I apply flex, without changing any settings, without doing anything, watch what now happens to the sphere. You notice it kind of shakes around a little bit. So this is useful for things like characters that have some fat, or are carrying some objects, and just want them to kind of shake a little bit, or sway. So if I change the flex to 3, for example, it's going to be a much more extreme effect. Maybe change the sway. Okay, so I can even, let me go ahead and apply edit poly and make it sway only on the top, for example. Soft selection, okay, and flex. Okay, so now it's only going to flex on the top, which will allow you to see better what the flex is doing. So you notice how it was shaking at the top? That is the flex. It's adding a secondary motion to our animation. And it's very useful for adding, that extra detail to your animation. You can see here the sphere is in stationary, and as it moves, you can see this is the sphere moving, and the flex is kind of causing this object to kind of move back, like it's like a piece of fat hanging on the object. And as the object stops, the flex will kind of shake it. So the flex modifier is something that I call simple to learn but difficult to master, because it has a lot of different things you can do with it. You can create a simple soft body. You can paint the weights, so you can exactly paint what you want the flex modifier to affect. You have forces here, which means that the flex modifier can be subject to forces like, well, there's no forces right now because I haven't created them, but forces like wind, gravity, physics forces, explosions. You can have all those things affect the flex modifier, as well as deflectors. You also have advanced parameters. You have advanced springs. You can add and remove springs, so you can actually set up springs. If you want to animate some kind of hair, for example, hair has its own animation system, but let's say you were creating some kind of stylized hair, so not normal human hair, but like hair for like a cartoon type character, you could use springs in the flex modifier to give that hair secondary motion. So if you have a character with a mohawk, for example, as they move around, the mohawk will sway left and right, back and forth, and that would be done for you for free by the flex modifier without you having to do any custom work on it. And here you have your center, and your weights and springs. So you can add and have your own springs here, which you can change each spring to be stronger and weaker. So you can have, you can have the base of the hair have a stronger spring that doesn't sway as much, and you can have the tip of the hair have a much more flexible spring, which will make the tip of the hair sway more. So this can be a very complex modifier, and it probably deserves its own video. But if you just want to quickly see how it works, repeat what I did with a sphere or something else, and you can see the flex modifier in action. And also you can experiment with selections and maybe soft selections. So this is a great way. If you have a fat character, you can have the fat shake around without having to do any special tricks to it, without having any special bones moving around. You can just use the flex modifier, and you can use the selections here and then the modifier itself to specify exactly which parts of the character are fat. So very handy modifier, very useful in animation. Let's see what we have next. Next we have the HSDS modifier. This is a bit of a strange one, and I haven't really found a way to use this, but basically what this allows you to do, it allows you to subdivide certain sections of your model. So I've never really used that one before, so I can't tell you too much about it. Next we have lattice. So you can see that these are all vertices, and if I apply the lattice modifier, so it kind of gives you a mess at the beginning. So we can have joints only, struts only, or both. So if I turn on joints only, let me go ahead and change the joint setting. Let me go ahead and decrease the radius so you can see what's happening here. So this is what's happening. Everywhere that there's a vertex, it creates these things there. You can have octas, tetras, or icosas, and those are basically created at every single vertex. This is useful for certain technical for certain buildings and certain construction work. And you can also have struts only, and struts are like, you can see that it can be a nice modifier for giving your object this effect that it's actually created from different metal pipes. So now it looks like this sphere is actually created from metal pipes. So if you wanted the effect of an object being created from different pieces and welded together, you can use the lattice modifier, and you can have both the beams and the spheres, or you can just have one at a time. So that is the lattice modifier. Haven't used it too much myself, but it's there and it does have its uses. Next we have linked X form. So linked X form is a kind of a nice modifier that I use sometimes. I'll give you an example of how I've used it. So I'll just go ahead and duplicate this sphere and isolate it. I'll go ahead and reset the X form and move the pivot to the center. Alright, so this is like a piece of a bridge or like a walkway. I'm going to go ahead and detach this as a clone. Shell. Scale it out in the Z and Y axis. I want to go ahead and connect these vertices, delete the bottom, and just kind of extrude it outwards and connect. And I'm going to go ahead and apply symmetry, and here we go. So this is like, it can be anything. Let's say it's like a piece of a walkway. What I will also do is I will go ahead and add some edges there. Okay, so we have two different objects here. We have the railing and we have the objects that hold it. So let's say I want to move the railing up. I move it up, but the objects do not follow. Now, one simple way of doing this is, I can simply attach the objects, and now I can go into the vertex mode and move them up, because now it's not two objects, it's now one object. So that's always one way of doing it. However, what if you had a lot of modifiers? Because remember, when you attach objects, you lose the modifiers, or you gain modifiers. And let's say it's very complex, you have a lot of things happening, you do not want to do that. You want the objects to remain as two separate objects. So what do? You can use the linked XForm modifier. So what I'll do is I make my selection first, because remember, you can limit what polygons, vertices are affected by the modifiers. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and select only these top vertices, and I'll go ahead and apply a linked XForm modifier. And it's a very simple modifier. You just pick the control object. So I'm going to click on Pick Control Object. I'm going to pick this railing. Okay, I might have to reset the XForm real quick. So let me go ahead and reset the XForm. That's probably what is happening wrong. What is going wrong here? Okay, I'll try again. I'll go ahead and select the vertices, linked XForm, pick control object, and click this object. As you can see, there's no problems now. So now, all the transformations that I do to this object, whether it's moving, rotating, or scaling, are now affecting the vertices of this object. So I no longer have to move these individually. I can now simply move this object and rotate it and have the other object follow. So you can see how this can come in handy. Because without this modifier, what you could do is you have to either merge them, attach them, or you would have to go through the process of individually moving them around. And if you do this, you lose a lot of accuracy and precision, because now you're not quite sure, where does this need to be? Does it need to be higher or lower? And you kind of have to guess, right? But with that modifier, linked XForm, it does that for you. And has lots of other uses, but this is how I've used it in the past. So thank you for watching, and take care.